I presume you're going to be manning the questions, Kate.
And we are going live now.
I haven't got a hat on.
Oh, there it is. Hot dang. Let me see if I can pick it up here.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Harvey Duckman room at Scarborough, at Sci-Fi Scarborough. Today we are talking about writing short stories. And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back. Can you mute whoever's got the Facebook on? Sci-Fi Scarborough. That would be cool. Today we are talking about writing short stories.
Me?
I'm going to put.
It's not me.
Whoever's got the Facebook on.
I'll shut mine off. Just
There we go. That's you. There we go. Splendid. Okay. Welcome to Harvey Duckman at Sci-Fi Scarborough, and we are talking about writing short stories and the craft thereof and the inspirations from. So we're going to go around the room and introduce everybody. I'll start off. I'm Kate Borcherel. I write the Sim Cavalier series of cybercrime thrillers. And I also write short stories in the Harvey Duckman Presents anthologies. Had several published so far, and I write non-fiction as well around emerging technology. So all sorts of books lurking at the back of me here. I'm going to hand on to Mark now.
I don't know why she always hands on to me first. I'm Mark Hayes. I write all kinds of bizarre, weird things. I've written stories for all the Harvey Duckman books that we've brought out. I also write my own novels, mostly the Hannibal, but also lots of different steampunk and stuff. But I've written everything from contemporary romances to wild, weird science fiction. I just write a lot and wear hats. And I'm going to pass on to Joseph now.
hi, everybody. Joseph Carabas here. I write autobiography, and strange enough, it gets sold as science fiction, fantasy, horror, children's stories, poetry. As my sister has said to me many times, did we grow up in the same house? But there you go. I write novels, short stories, and have a jolly good time of it. So next.
Let's hand on to Alexandrina.
Hi, I'm Alexandrina Brandt. I mainly write sci-fi and fantasy with a focus on steampunk. And I'm also working on a YA mystery novel at the moment as well. Currently polishing these off and looking for agent representation and publication. And I do write short stories as well. Otherwise I wouldn't be in this talk.
Chris.
Hello, my name's Christine King. My main focus is writing romantic historical novels. I've had 3 published so far, and I'm just awaiting the 4th one to be produced. I also write lots of short stories, a few of which have been in the Harvey Duckman anthologies, including the Pirate special, in which I did a ghost pirate story. My short stories all tend to veer towards the supernatural, not so much sci-fi, but supernatural and horror. But my, as I said, my main focus is writing romantic historical novels, and I'm currently in chapter 2 of book number 5.
Ben.
Hi, my name's Ben Sawyer. I mainly write a series of urban fantasy stories set in York, where I live. The first of which is featured in the Harvey Duckman Presents Christmas special. I also had, and I have the first novel in that series is on its way. I also had a story published recently in the Harvey Duckman Presents Pirate special as well, which was a cosmic horror on a desert island.
That is interesting that you've got your short stories in Christmas and in Pirates, because there you're writing very much to a theme. And I think what we've wanted to talk about today is that short stories are a breed apart. They're a whole different way of writing to novel writing. And so I'm not sure. I think if we start with Alexandrina, because you've come into short stories from novels very much. What's been your experience of changing your routine?
The most difficult thing for me is, of course, the length. So I'm used to writing, especially nowadays, my first drafts tend to be over 100,000 words. And of course, you can't do that for a short story. So it's a case of almost rewiring my brain to recognize that the format that I'm writing in has got to be so much shorter. You know, we're looking at 5,000 words maximum. I think my Harvey story is about 3,000. So that for me was looking at the core of the story, and I wanted to say, okay, I've got these two characters. They are characters from a bigger novel I've got as well. So I already knew the characters, and I wanted to look at how I could expand on their experiences in just one snapshot, just a vignette that would show them experiencing what happens next, basically. And for me, it was looking at the start and the end and trying to put that together, rather than going, okay, I need a plot that's going to fill 20, 30 chapters.
Yeah, I mean, the length straight away gives you a completely different challenge, doesn't it? Ben, you were nodding away there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the big difference between a short story and a novel is with a short story, you're basically coming in 20 pages from the end. You know, and I always say, if you're writing horror, you're coming in 20 pages from death, which is a tricky place to be. So yeah, you have a limited space, and you really need to focus on what is the most important part of this story. You can't go off into tangents and spend a chapter with side characters. It's very, very focused.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that the characters get away from you is something that we're really familiar with as novelists. I know, Mark, you have regular arguments with your characters, don't you? How do you force them into the structure of a short story?
Don't. Have you ever tried to force Hannibal into the structure of anything? Short stories, I write short stories differently to most people, I think. I start with an idea of the end, of where I'm going. I have to know exactly where I'm going with a short story, and then I find a way to get there. So the first Harvey Duckman edition has a Hannibal short story in it where he's fighting a duel on Hampstead Heath while off his head on LSD. And that was the entire idea behind the story. That was the only thing I had. And I spent 6,000 words getting him to that point. And Hannibal tried to wander off in several directions in the process. But I've written other short stories that are very different, are very, very tight, but they're always based about one core idea. Whereas in a novel, it's much the same. You still have one core idea, but you've got a lot more room and space to explore it. With a short story, you really want to get to that idea and get to the twist. Usually there's a twist. A short story has to have a twist or some resolution at the end to make it make sense. But I generally start with the idea of the end and work from there. And occasionally I don't. Occasionally I start with the idea at the beginning and then try to find out what the hell it's about. But those are more difficult, to be fair.
That's interesting, because when I started off writing short stories as opposed to much longer format, one of my favorite ones I actually started at the beginning, and there is a bit of a story behind it. I wrote this really serious book about blockchain and cryptocurrency about a year, it came out about a year ago, and I wanted to demonstrate how digital currency would be actually more practical than galactic credits kind of thing. And I wrote a little paragraph about a weary traveller coming off a spaceship and looking for a cocktail, and how do they pay for the cocktail? You know, how do you pay for the cocktail in the spaceport? And this nagged at me for 6 months. So all I had was little traveller coming down the ramp looking for a cocktail, and I wanted to see what happened to that character. And that is where the short story came from. It came from the beginning, not from the end. I wanted to explore where they were going, but there wasn't enough for a whole book. It wasn't a grand vision. It was just a what happened to you? Chris, you're laughing there. What's your experience?
Well, with me, because my main focus is writing novels. When I came to writing short stories, first of all, I was in a writing group, and we used to try and produce a short story every week on a specific subject, which I find very useful if I've got a sort of a subject to aim for, like when I did a short story for the Pirate Anthology. But my short stories were tending to get longer and longer, and I know 6E like their short stories between sort of 3,000-4,000 words. Well, mine were going like 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. So I sent one of my short stories to a fellow writer who told me I didn't really need a resolution. I could leave it before the ending and leave it for the reader to use their imagination as to what was going to happen next. But I found that really difficult, because with a short story, I'm the same as when I write a novel. I like a beginning, a middle, and an ending, and I do like a resolution. So I have several sort of short stories in my back catalogue, which I've been back to and I've looked at and tightened a lot of them up to fit into the criteria of less than 5,000 words. But again, I need some kind of a focus to think, right, I'm going to write a story. For instance, I wrote a story about a serial killer and that was quite compact and quite short, but I have to watch the tendency to let my short stories get longer and longer and longer, because, you know, I'll end up with a novella rather than a short story. So, but I think that's just a failing of mine, where I need to focus more and get as much information as possible into a shorter period of words.
So you wrote a short story about a serial killer. He only killed one person. That was it.
No, he'd killed several people,
Okay.
but it was supernatural. It was a supernatural one. It appeared in one of the Harvey Duckmans, volume 4, I think it was. But yeah, see, all my short stories tend to be on the supernatural side, although my main writing is romance and chick lit and historical. As soon as you sit me down to write a short story, they become supernatural, and there's ghosts and there's killers and people getting blown up and all sorts of things, really. So I do have a bit of a dark side to my imagination as well.
We'd never have guessed.
You wouldn't, would you?
I know, Joseph, that your most recent short story in Harvey Duckman. I know we've had a question there saying, where do you publish short stories? Well, we all submit to the Harvey Duckman anthologies, which is a great place for people to publish. There are 137 stories already published in the series of 9 books, and 58 authors represented there, from established authors who've been working in the space for a very long time, to people who are absolutely brand new and never written anything before, from the ages of 12 up to their 70s. And the very last short story and the most recent one is short, and it will make you cry. That was Joseph's work.
Yeah.
Joseph, talk to us about short stories, because yours are sublime in that way.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much, truly. When my fellow authors tell me that my work touched them, that truly means a lot to me. To realize that you've brought joy to one's peers is significant.
Tears, Joseph, tears.
Joy, whatever, tears, whatever, tears. As long as they were joyful tears, as long as they were happy tears, as long as you enjoyed the experience, that's what's good. So thank you. Yes. that short story, The Little Nitty Dragon, that actually came about from, I don't know if everyone remembers, but everyone on this call, pretty much for this meeting, we get together, for those of you who don't take part, we get together on Thursdays. And Julie Hatton was talking about something, and she mentioned someone at a con had brought with them a little knitted dragon. But for you folks from Scarborough and elsewhere, you can probably tell that I'm the one outlier in the group. They allowed me in. They gave me a box of U's to put in my words. So, but anyway, she happened to mention this little knitted dragon, but her accent caught me, and I heard the little nitty dragon, and boom, there it was, the entire short story. So I went, I can write you a story about that. And she said, a short story about what? I said, that thing you just said, little knitted dragon. No, nitty. You said nitty. No, I said knitted. Listen, lady, I'm from America. We just had Trump for president, so do what I tell you. So anyway, and I do apologize to everyone in the world. I so apologize. But anyway, so I wrote it, and I know my beloved wife, partner, and Princess Susan, she read it, and she was like, oh. And Jilly wrote me back, and she said, oh my God, I was crying when I read that. So you should all read it and let us know what your emotional reactions are to it. Mark, who has a heart of stone, obviously didn't care.
I think that's one of the joys of writing short stories, is that you can stretch beyond the world that your novels are in and beyond the things that those characters are doing. And it's refreshing. I don't know if anyone else feels that way when they're writing short.
Yeah. And when I used to belong to a writing group, we'd have a different subject every week. And it was great because it really takes you out of the genre that you write in. I mean, I've written short stories about, well, like I said, supernatural ghosts, that sort of thing. But it was totally out of my comfort zone, some of the stories we were asked to produce. And I really enjoyed them, really enjoyed doing them. But
Alexandrina, how have yours differed between your long novels and your short stories?
Yeah, well, it's definitely, like you say, kind of a refresher of the situation and of the characters. One of my other short stories, I wanted to focus on a side character, and I just decided, I knew what her background was, but I'd never even looked into it because she was a side character. So I thought, okay, I will just set it in her university and just have her, for starters, doing some cooking, because I knew she was interested in cooking, and then doing some of her cartography work as well. And for me, in that one, it started off with the character and the place, and then suddenly I had this idea that she needed to finish this assignment because she was at university. And for me, the idea of getting a short story together is almost, you know, how planets come together with gravity and they all gather things together. It's this one idea that sort of pulls in the other elements of it to surround it and make it into a long, well, not a longer piece, but, you know, a piece of prose that will be roughly 3,000 words. Whereas the novel writing process for me is more linear almost. I have a plot and I plot it, but short story can be a bit more pantsing because it's drawing on the core concept and the character rather than the plot itself.
That's very true. That's a very good distinction. Very much. Joseph, sorry, you were jumping in there as well.
Well, I was going to say something about Chris. You said that you were in a group and they gave you different writing assignments every week.
Yeah.
I know on my social feeds, sometimes I will drop unique words into my streams and use them as a prompt for people from my writing community, brothers and sisters. And it's a genuine word, usually in English. And I say use it in a unique and interesting way. And it's fascinating to see the different genre writers, what they will respond with.
Mhm.
to a given word. You can always tell the steampunk authors because there's a gasket somewhere involved. You can always tell the pure sci-fi authors because whatever the word is, and then on the spaceship Lunera, the horror authors lurking behind the quantifolk, okay. But it's really fascinating, and it's, to me, I give myself writing prompts every day as part of like a warm-up exercise. I don't know how many of you do that, regardless of what I'm working on, a novel, short story, poem, whatever. And I know the minute I say poem, Mark goes, but
Not being drawn on poetry.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that makes us individually more competent as writers is when we challenge ourselves, when we go further, when, if you're used to writing novels, don't worry about making it perfect. Write a short story. If you're a novelist, can you write a flash piece that works? I don't care if you get it published, just see if you can do it. Give yourself that discipline, because a flash piece of 1,000 words, think about it, that's a scene in a novel.
Yep.
1,000 words is basically what, 3.5, 4 pages in a novel, double spaced, maybe? That's a scene in a novel.
Yeah.
A one character short story is a chapter in a novel. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm still learning how to put U's into words. So
The art of writing is to write. The only way anybody learns how to write is to write.
yes, agreed.
The old line is write a million words, throw them away. Now you're ready to start. There's a lot of truth in that. But I started writing when I was a teenager. I got my first book published when I was in my 40s.
Mm.
That's not to discourage people younger than me by any means. It's to write books and write them younger. I did a lot of things in between my teenage years and my 40s that were nothing to do with writing.
I had a short story accepted for a magazine back in, I was only a teenager myself, it was in the 70s, and it was published in a girl magazine called Fab 208, which lasted till about 1970, and then it disappeared, or 75, something like that. But I had a couple of short stories accepted by them, so I thought, oh, this is it, this is my career, I'm going to be a writer. And then I didn't write another thing till I was in my 40s as well. I joined a writing group, and I won a competition, which was brilliant, and it's never looked back. But I'm still not a full-time writer, which is what I ultimately would love to be.
There's a question here saying, do you ever feel boxed in by genre expectations when you're writing, or does it not really factor into your decisions when planning? That's an interesting one, which I'll jump into, and then anyone else who's shaking their head can jump in. Sometimes when you're writing novels, you go where your characters want, and sometimes you will cross into other genres, and there is some sort of culture around, when you're trying to put them into a box on Amazon and go, well, is it a thriller or is it sci-fi? Is it this or is it that? But with short stories, you can do anything because it's only 3,000 words or 1,000 words or 5,000 words. Joseph, you're nodding away there.
Well, I appreciate the writing to a genre, but I've never sat down and said, I'm going to write a science fiction story. The story dictates what the plot, the scene, the characters, et cetera, are going to be. And my regular readers, both of them, I'm kidding, my regular readers, very often when they write to me or talk to me on a Zoom, they will say, your genre is Joseph, which is wonderful branding, crap marketing. And until my name goes on top of the book, right? Like Stephen King, Nora Roberts, Joseph Carabas, and then people can go, Carabas, what the hell kind of name is that? But until that happens, it's rotten marketing. People say you write Joseph, that's your genre, because I do write a bunch of different types. I even, but with About a Chris, I've got what people have told me is a chick lit book in going as a project. And I remember when someone said to me, it's chick lit, I went, chiclets, the little gummy things? What are you talking about? Because I'm so out of it. I live in a cave. This is actually cave.
Ben, you were nodding away there around genre and
Was I? Oh, good. I was just enjoying the anecdote.
You, Ben, you're on screen. Wake up.
No, we've had it. We were talking about being boxed in by genre and the idea of also word limits and how we manage those. How do you feel around word limits and genre and so on? I think you're fairly settled in your genre, aren't you, Ben, across all of the things that you write?
Yeah, it's pretty much. It's pretty much all fantasy. But I mean, one thing I found very useful with was when Harvey did the pirate special, which we have, was a very different thing. I've been very much used to writing in this one series, and suddenly being told, okay, here's a brief, here's a deadline, which was something very different. You've got, we want a story about pirates, and my other stories are very much landlocked. There's not a lot of opportunity to have pirates in them. It was just, there was something very useful about having that structure. We can say, right, we want 3,000 words about pirates by this date.
Yeah, it's a whole different way of writing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a whole different way of writing.
You know about the plumbing special coming up, don't you, Ben?
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
I was going to say, we've been talking about it in the Twitter chat about a plumbing special.
This
You've
goes
got
right
characters
back.
you can shove anything in.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. To be fair, with my pirate story, I ended up putting my pirates in space and made them parrots because I could.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I said when I found out they were doing a pirate story, it was, well, I don't really know how tall ships work. I don't know enough to write that convincingly. How can I get my pirates on dry land on page 1, and what will they be doing? Was kind of the first question, and that led to X marks the spot.
Yes, indeed.
I
I'm aware
remember
that we're
when-
getting towards
sorry.
the end of our time, and I can't believe how fast it's flown. It really has. So can I just go around everybody and say, what would you say to people who are setting out on writing short stories, whether they're doing it for the first time, or whether they're coming from novel writing and going into a shorter format? What would your best advice and suggestions be? Who shall I start with? Who wants to start?
Oh, go on then.
Go on then, Mark.
And my best advice, just write. Just have an idea, write while it's interesting you. The moment you lose interest in the story you're writing, stop, put it on one side, write something else. And keep doing that, because eventually you'll go back to one of them and think, actually, I have a better idea for this, and you'll rewrite it again. I write short stories in 2 drafts. I never do more than 2 drafts in a short story. But there is a draft before the first draft, which is me throwing some random words about. And I have a folder on my computer called Scraps, which has, about 200 or 300 word files in there. And most of them may have nothing more than about 500 words in them. And I've just thrown words at a page and then lost my thread or lost the idea that I had to start with and put it back in the folder. And occasionally I go back and I wander through and I find and I have an idea for that and I take it forwards.
I have one of those folders too. Joseph was nodding here, and Alexandrina's nodding as well. Joseph, tell us about your folder.
It's the modern day equivalent of the writer's notebook, of which I also have piles full of ideas.
Joseph?
Well, I agree with much of what Mark said. I think we all have, or I hope if you are wanting to become a writer, you have a junk folder of attempts, of ideas. I have a folder called In Process, which some of them, oh my God, they are just waiting to come through. And some of them are like, burn it, you stupid schmuck. You don't know what the hell you're doing. I also have a file called Ideas, which I started keeping by hand back when I was a teenager. And my high school had access to a big iron computer because that's all we had. So I had to save my ideas to this big iron computer, which now we call it the cloud. Back then we called it Dartmouth. But for the actual advice, I agree, write every day. Right up in there though is read everything, anything. I don't care what it is. Read the labels off of cans. Read to figure out how words are put together. And just important in there is learn how to read like an author. When you read something and you get lost in it, it is so incredible, it pulls you in. Take a step back. What did this author do that got me so hooked that the world went away and I was in the story? How did they put words together? How did they get me into that scene? Why do I believe this character? Ask yourself these questions and then duplicate it. I love this character because let me write a character that does that so I can do the same thing. See how close you get. Copy passages that you really love. Don't worry about doing exact. You don't want it exact. You want the concepts and the ideas in your words. Practice, practice, practice.
Practice makes perfect.
Mhm.
Alexandrina?
It's funny you talk about scraps actually, because my folder isn't called scraps, it's called removed, and that kind of follows onto the advice that I was going to give, because my advice would be to not try and do everything at once. I get a lot of beta readers saying to me this is too complicated, so I was taking out middle bits of sections and characters. It's okay to have all these ideas as long as you can differentiate them, and for a short story, definitely I would start with just one core concept and grow on that rather than trying to throw everything at it, because you try and put too many things in a short story, you're going to get just words and paragraphs rather than an actual story that has a theme or has a plot arc and a twist at the end. And of course, there's nothing wrong with having all the ideas. It's just knowing how to pull out of that something that you can have a first draft of and then polish up. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Thank you. Chris?
Well, my advice follows on from what Joseph also was saying about reading. Just read. I love reading anthologies of short stories, not to copy them, obviously, but just to spark my imagination as well. And I don't actually have a file on the computer. I used to have one, but what I found was when I'd written down any ideas, once it was out of my head, I never really went back to it. So I try not to write too many notes, but I know a lot of writers find that incredibly useful to have a notebook and write down notes as they come to you. But me personally, if I get an idea for a short story, I'll just sit on the computer and write it. Just let it out and flow. But yeah, I definitely would recommend any potential writer or aspiring writer to just read lots and lots. It doesn't matter what genre you read, whether it's romantic or horror or sci-fi, steampunk, whatever. Just read everything. Have a complete broad knowledge of writing. Don't just limit yourself to one genre. I mean, I love Lee Child, for instance. I love reading the Reacher stories, but which is completely different to anything I would ever write. But I love those crime novels. I read all sorts of things, but just read everything. Don't limit yourself to just one genre, and hopefully the inspiration will come.
Thanks, Chris. Ben?
I would just think about the things that fascinate you. I think there's just things you see around you all the time are stories waiting to happen, and it's about, taking those ideas and just rolling and just running with it, seeing where it takes you, and also read lots.
Brilliant. Well, I think that really sums up the inspiration is in the world around us and in the things that we read. If anyone's looking out for things to read, may I suggest a copy of Harvey Duckman Presents is always a good place to start. Find your new favourite writer in any of those 137 stories published to date, 58 authors already involved. So thank you today to Mark Hayes.
And also, if you're interested in writing yourselves, if you go to the Harvey Duckman website, which is easy to find, you just type Harvey Duckman. There are information on there as how you can submit stories yourself if you want to join us. Maybe next year you can be sat on this panel and I won't have to do it.
Oh yes, you will.
Yeah, that is true. We are always looking for new contributors. Very happy to encourage new writers who've never been published, and those who are coming from more experienced areas as well. We have a really good variety of people, and it's just an absolute pleasure to be with this group and to be able to talk to you all today. So once again, thank you to Mark Hayes, to Alexandrina Brandt, to Joseph Carabas, to Ben Sawyer, to Christine King. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a good rest of your Sunday, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.